Hey, this is Life with Sean Renee here, back with another video. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell every time I upload, which is between 1 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Anyways, this video is about a friend snitched on her, almost got 5 years in prison. Let's watch the video.
My best friend of 10 years had me facing 5 years fail time.
I watched that 8-part story, so you don't have to. That's Rucker, and she said her best friend of 10 years snitched on her and almost sent her to federal prison for 5 years. So this story all took place back in 2020. Rucker was minding her business, she was raising her children, and she had this best friend. We're gonna call her best friend Dusty. Dusty is Rucker's godmother to her children, right? So they're really close. So Dusty calls up Rucker one day, and she's like, hey girl, I have a little scheme that we can run. It can get you $150. All you got to do is take this prescription that I'm going to steal from my doctor's office that I work at, and you fill the prescription, get the bottle of pills, bring it back to me. I'll sell the pills, and I'll break you off $150. Rucker's a single mom. She's like, hell yeah, let's do this. Like, how do I get the prescription from you? I'm going out of town right now. And the best friend, Dusty, tells her, like, oh, I'll leave it on your table because I'm your best friend and I have keys to your house, obviously. So Rucker's like, okay, cool. Dusty tells her, and then when the pharmacy calls the doctor's office to verify the prescription, Dusty is going to be behind the phone verifying, but it has to happen on a Monday because that's when the doctor's office is closed. Rucker is like, perfect. Comes home, picks it up. Rucker ends up going to the childhood pharmacy she's been going to her whole life. She turns in the prescription and she goes to a dentist's office for her children. Then she gets a call from Dusty, and Dusty is like, hey girl, like, how's it going? Did you drop it off? Did they fill it? She's like, I don't know yet. Like, I have to go after I'm done with this dentist appointment. So then Dusty's like, okay, bet. Rucker's at the dentist's office, right? She gets a call from Dusty and she's freaking out. She's like, girl, you need to go pick up this prescription, da-da-da-da. She's acting really scared. And Rucker's like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? She's like, they called, they're on some BS. They're not trying to, like, fill the prescription, just go pick it up, right? So then Rucker's like, okay, again, she's not asking too many questions. So when Rucker got to the pharmacy, they basically tell her they're not going to be able to fulfill the prescription and that they need her ID. She doesn't think twice about it. She hands them her ID and then she leaves. Now Rucker's on the phone with her best friend and they're discussing like possible consequences, what may have gone wrong, and they're trying to think positive about the situation, right? Rucker's living with her mom at the time. She ends up telling her about what happened, and Rucker's thinking like, it can't be that bad, right? She, mind you, just finished beating a case just shortly before this all took off, right? So she's like, dude, I don't want to be dealing with the law anymore. Like, so boom, fast forward. The pharmacy ends up reaching out to the doctor and they ask the doctor, like, hey, is this a patient of yours? Is this prescription valid? And I guess the doctor doesn't have that many patients because immediately he was like, yeah, that's not one of my patients. So then he ends up calling the best friend that works for him, right? He calls Dusty and the doctor is like, hey, Dusty, like, do you recognize this name? And she confirms and says, yes, I do recognize it. There's two girls that work there, right? Dusty and this other girl. Now the doctor's trying to figure out where this prescription came from, right? Like, he definitely did not write it. Dusty ends up giving the doctor some type of like bad excuse, gives him some type of storyline. She ends up calling Rucker back and she's like, yeah, the doctor talked to me. I told him that you're a really good person, that you're a single mother, all these things. And Rucker's sitting there like, why are you telling him I'm a good person? Like, you should be telling him the truth. What the best friend ended up telling the doctor was, oh, I accidentally took some paperwork home and your prescriptions weren't one of them. And Rucker is really put off by what Dusty is telling her over the phone. So she ends up getting off the phone call with her. So she ends up going to another friend, a mutual friend, right? And they are discussing the situation. Now the mutual friend's baby daddy is sitting right there. He's been around the block. He's an OG. And he basically tells Rucker, like, sounds like she threw you under the bus. Like, it definitely sounds like she's already snitched on you. Like, I would be, very cautious moving forward in what you say to her and how you, interact with her. Mind you, Rucker's already feeling the vibe. She's like, this girl's turned on me. So Rucker describes Dusty as the type of girl you would never find without her hair done, nails done. Like, she's always looking put together. She said in the 10-some years that she's known this girl, she's only seen her not put together like once or twice. So when she's at this mutual friend's house and Dusty shows up disheveled, she's like, okay, this is serious. Like, what's going on, right? So she basically walks up to Rucker. She's like, hey, can we talk? And at this point, Rucker's not really feeling it. She's like, all right, bet, let's go to the car and talk, right? So they go to the car. Dusty's like, I need to, clarify to you. Like, I didn't say nothing. Like, I'm trying to make sure that this situation is rectified for the both of us. I don't want either of us to walk away with any type of penalties. And I talked to the doctor and he said he's not going to press any charges. Dusty is apologizing profusely. And Rucker's just thinking like, I'm pretty sure you're apologizing because you've snitched on me already. She's like, I can't do anything about this right now. Let me just go to sleep and wake up and I'll deal with all of this in the morning. So at this time, Rucker's also looking for a job, right? So she comes home one day and her mom's like, hey, somebody called for you. Like, go call him back. So Rucker's thinking it's a job. So she immediately calls back the number and the person on the other line is an agent for the health department, and they basically say like, hey, your name came up in a case that has to do with drugs. And Rucker's sitting there like, I don't do drugs, like my name should have nothing to do with that. And so he further explains that he needs her to come down and like talk to them and all of this, right? So immediately Rucker puts it together and she's like, oh, this has to do with Dusty and those pills, right? So she basically tells him like, okay, like I'll come down and talk to you, like it's fine. So Rucker calls Dusty and she's like, hey, like what's going on with the case? Like, do you have any updates for me? And the best friend's like, oh, I don't know anything. And so off bat, Rucker thought that was weird. And she tells her like, hey, the agent called me. He wants me to come in and talk to him. And I'm not going to do that because if I go in there, I'm going to end up implicating the both of us. So it's better that I just not say anything at all. And so the best friend's like, okay, bet, like, yeah, that makes sense. That weekend, Dusty and Rucker end up getting into a little argument, right? So they don't talk for a little bit. So Monday comes around. She gets a phone call from the girl that Dusty works with at the doctor's office. We're going to call her Shirley. So Shirley calls Rucker and she's like, hey, girl, like, where you at? And Rucker's like, what are you talking about? I'm at a doctor's office. Like, what do you want? You know? And she's like, oh, I was just wondering what you were doing, like, where you were at, da-da-da. Like, basically trying to get her, you know, whereabouts. Rucker's like, why are you on my phone? Rucker hangs up and she calls Dusty. And she's like, yo, why is your, you know, coworker calling me asking me where I'm at? Like, if you have questions for me and you're wondering what I'm doing, where I'm at, you can hit me up. I know that when all this first happened, you, of course, inquired with her. You asked her questions. But, like, this is between me and you now. You know what I'm saying? If you have something to say, like, call me. Dusty's like, oh, I don't know why she called you. Like, I didn't tell her to call you. Like, I don't know what that's about, right? And so Rucker's like, so what's up? Like, what's your question? And she's like, oh, I was just wondering, like, we haven't talked. Like, I was just wondering if you went down to talk to the agent. And Rucker's like, oh, you think because me and you had a little argument this weekend that I'm just gonna flip on you and I'm gonna run and tell the agent whatever you think I'm gonna tell him? Like, no, I told you I wasn't gonna go down and talk to him. I'm not gonna go down and talk to him. Like, I don't switch up on people like that. A lot of people in Rucker's support system were telling her, like, you need to start, like, getting a bond together. You need to start thinking about yourself. Like, this girl's acting really weird, and stop having conversations that are in person. Like, document everything. Like, if you're gonna talk to this girl, make sure you have some type of paper trail. So fast forward, a month and a half goes by. Rucker starts noticing, like, the best friend's not really coming around. She's not really talking to her. Like, she's definitely distancing herself from this girl, right? In the meanwhile, the agent, we're just gonna call him the agent is getting more and more upset with Rucker because she's not cooperating. She's not pulling up when she says she is. She's not answering his phone calls. He's becoming increasingly impatient with her, right? Rucker also noticed that the best friend had stopped talking to her over the phone, any way that she can get a paper trail. If she wanted to talk to her, especially about the situation, she was pulling up on her and talking to her in person, right? So one day they're talking, and Rucker asked her, like, hey, did you tell your mom about what happened? Like, is she up to date on everything? And Dusty's like, yeah, I told my mom. And so Rucker's like, oh, did you tell your mom the truth, or did you tell her what you told the doctor? And Dusty's like, I told her the truth. And she's like, what you mean, what I told the doctor? And so Rucker's, you know, trying to figure out exactly where the best friend stood as far as, like, what exactly did she tell the doctor. The way that Dusty's trying to make it seem is that she didn't implicate Rucker in any way, shape, or form. She's like, I didn't say nothing about you. Dusty tells Rucker, like, yeah, the doctor told me, like, this is not the first time this has happened. They're probably just going to send an agent down, get a few statements from us, and show us that, you know, the prescription should be locked up in a box and, like, probably hit us with a fine. Like, that's probably what's going to happen. Like, you're good kind of thing, right? So Rucker's like, okay, like that. Now it's been about 5 months since everything went down. And the agent is like, I'm just going to drive down from Columbus and I'm going to go to this little town and I'm going to get these statements, right? It just so happened to be that the day he came down to get these statements, Dusty was at work that day. So the doctor talks to the agent first. He tells him pretty much the same thing that he told him over the phone. When it came to Dusty, she apparently voluntarily decided to get up and put a statement in. And I'm sure you can already guess what she wrote. The best friend ends up writing a whole statement, right? And she ends up writing, yeah, I know this girl. I know of her. I was at a party with her that weekend. I took paperwork home on accident and my car was unlocked. And all I know is that that girl was at the party too. My car was unlocked and the paperwork is in there. What happened after that? I don't know. I never saw the girl take the paperwork. After that, Dusty ends up calling Rucker and being like, hey, the agent came down. I basically told him that, like, we were at a party together and yeah. And Rucker's like, what party? What are you talking about? Why'd you say that? Now, mind you, up until this point, it's been 5 months, right? No warrants have been put on Rucker's name. When Dusty wrote that statement in, the agent told her, like, write down Rucker's name. Write her name in parentheses right here. And the best friend did just that. Now, mind you, because Rucker was officially charged, when she sat down with her lawyer and looked at the discovery pack, she was able to see the statement that the agent wrote, the statement that her best friend wrote, all of it, right? And she noticed that in the agent's notes, he said that the best friend asked for a separate piece of paper because she said that what she was writing initially didn't make any sense. So she needed a different piece of paper. The agent didn't think much of it. Rucker feels like because the agent was so pissed off at Rucker for not cooperating, he was willing to take any statement and make any story make sense, you know? So he walks out of the room, grabs Dusty another piece of paper, and when he comes back in, the paper that Dusty was initially writing is gone. Never to be found again. And Rucker feels like he should have pressed her for that initial piece of paper and asked, like, hey, what did you write down initially? I want to read that as well. Also in the agent's report, it said that Dusty was visibly shaking and nervous. Like she wasn't acting normal. So boom, 2 months passed from then, right? So it's been a total of like 7 months since this whole situation happened. Rucker's at a job orientation about an hour and a half away from her house, right? She needed a job so bad she was willing to take it. So she's out there doing her orientation and she gets a Facebook message from like somebody that lives in her area. Now, mind you, she doesn't really talk to anybody that lives in her neighborhood. So the fact that this person was like messaging her already had her like, what's this about? She opens the message and it says like, hey girl, like there was a bunch of police at the house today. Like, oh my God. And Rucker's like, what the hell? Like, whose apartment were they in front of? And the girl's gonna say, oh, I don't know. They were just out here though. And Rucker's like, you know whose apartment they were in front of. So she gets home and she asks the girl again, like, whose apartment were they in front of? And she's still trying to act brand new. So Rucker and her maintenance man are cool. And this is just a side note. Always be cool with your maintenance man, ladies. Always be cool with your maintenance man. Rucker talks to the maintenance man. She's like, hey, were the police here today? The maintenance man is like, oh yeah, they was thick too. They came in deep as hell. And Rucker's like, oh really? Like, damn, like that? Like, whose apartment were they in front of? And the maintenance man's gonna look at her and go, yours. Rucker said she almost fell to the floor. At this point, she's like, oh my God, this is getting really serious. Come to find out, it was like 3 black trucks, 3 sheriff cars, 1 regular patrol. They surrounded the whole apartment. They almost kicked in Rucker's door. Only reason they didn't kick it in is because the landlord came out and was like, yo, Rucker's not here. She's not here right now. The landlord told Rucker like, oh, I didn't tell him anything. Apparently what she actually did was tell the police, oh, she's at school picking up her kids. And then the landlord asked the police officers, do you want to leave your business card and I'll make sure to get it to you? And the police officers were like, well, no, it's fine. At this point, she's like, okay, I'm going to have to, deal with this head on. So she calls the agent and she's like, hey, I heard you came up to my house looking for me the other day. And the agent's like, I did. I definitely did. And she's like, for what? And he's like, to serve you this warrant. Rucker's telling him, I've asked you to see this warrant so many times. Show it to me. If you're not showing me the warrant, I'm not just going to turn myself in. She has a friend that's in law enforcement, and Rucker had this friend look it up in NCIC. She even went as far as to call the FBI to figure out, is this actually in the database? And nobody told her that she actually had a warrant. So she was like, unless you give me proof of an actual warrant, I'm not turning myself in. And then another person ends up taking the phone from that agent, right? And then this is like a deep voice like Asian, and he's like, Miss Rucker, I don't know why you think these is games that we're playing with you, but we will find you and we're not going to stop until we catch you. That's essentially what he tells her. And so at this point, Rucker's like, oh my God. Like, so she tells the agent, as long as I see the warrant, I'll turn myself in. And the deep voice agent tells her like, no, that's not an option. That's not what we're doing here. You either turn yourself in or we're gonna catch you. She tells the agents, I need to talk to my lawyer. At this point, she don't even got a lawyer. She ends up calling her brother, who's been around the block, dealt with his own, legal issues. And she asks him like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Like, what should I do? And he basically tells her, call their bluff. Wait it out. If they're gonna take you to jail, they'll come and get you. If not, don't turn yourself in. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna listen to my brother. She ends up calling Dusty and being like, yo, the cops try to kick my door in. And she's like, what? That's insane. And so she tells her like, I'm basically just gonna go turn myself in. And the best friend's like, we don't even have your bond money together. Rucker's thinking like, oh, now it's a we? Now we're a we? Okay, bet. Either way, I need to turn myself in. Dusty basically suggests to Rucker that she should go on the run and wait for them to have the bond money. Instead of sitting in jail, she might as well, be on the run. And Rucker's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a mother. That is not an option. Mind you, the best friend is 7 months pregnant. It's not like she doesn't have anything to lose either. Rucker ends up telling her, like, I'm not going on the run. As long as you didn't rat me out and you didn't snitch, I should be straight. Everything should work out in my favor, right? Rucker ends up going to his sister-in-law's house, and her sister-in-law, the mother, was there, right? So she's talking to the mother, and the mother tells her, like, it sounds like Dusty's definitely ratted you out, and you need to start protecting yourself. You know what I'm saying? This is why the authorities are not worried about Dusty. They're only worried about you. It's become very clear to Rucker that this is a very serious situation. She decides to contact a few lawyers. She even drives up to Columbia to get as much information as she can. They're no help. The biggest thing that Rucker was trying to avoid was the cops busting in on her, and then the kids watching this whole thing happen as she's getting hauled away. So she put her kids at her mother's house. So Rucker's at her homegirl's house, right? And she's talking to the homegirl and she's talking to her homegirl's mom. And the homegirl's mom's listening to the whole thing and she's like, hell no, give me that agent's number right now. I'm about to talk to him. So she calls the agent. She's like, I'm not understanding. Like, she conspired with another person. Why aren't you worried about the person she conspired with? She did not do this by herself. Not to mention, she has proof, she has messages, she has everything that you need to show that this is not something she did on her own. You need to, you know, like, go after Dusty as well. The agent basically tells her, look, all I need Rucker to do is come down to Columbia, write a statement, and we'll take her to jail from there. Rucker wakes up, she drives to Columbia, she writes the statement, and they basically tell her, like, oh, we're gonna take you to jail on Monday. Like, go back home, come back on Monday, we'll take you to jail. So she goes to her local jail on Monday. She gets greeted by 2 guards. Now, Rucker already knew, like, I have a plan. If I go in early enough, they'll process me, I'll see the judge, and I'll get out by the end of the day, right? She's like, I'm not going on the weekend, and I'm not going hella late in the day. So she got there, they processed her, she got to see the judge. Judge was like, yeah, you can be released. By 7 p.m., she was released. She had a friend waiting there because she already knew how the system worked. So she was like, I'm just going to take a friend, have him drive me out there, and just wait for me in the car. It's when Rucker drove to Columbia to write the statement that she saw the statement that her best friend wrote and was like, oh, you contradicted yourself. Like, everything you told me was a lie, and you actually snitched on me months ago, you know? So she's like, yeah, I'll definitely write a statement. One thing that's interesting that Rucker said was, it's not about who tells the truth, it's about who tells it first. She felt like because she was choosing to be uncooperative, because she was trying to, you know, protect her and her best friend, she knew the minute she talked, she was going to incriminate the both of them. She decided not to, you know, talk to this agent. And because she didn't decide to talk to him and the best friend Dusty did, they're now favoring Dusty's statement and not really giving any credence to what it is that, you know, Rucker is showing them, evidence and statement wise. So when Rucker got out of jail, she's like, I'm going to have to get a lawyer, right? Lawyers are so expensive. She got a little lucky. Her social studies teacher from 8th grade was also a lawyer. He taught history, but he also was a lawyer on the side. So she called him up, told him what was going on, and he was shocked. He was like, Rucker, I can't believe you're, like, involved in something like this. And she's like, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. She said back then, she's not the proudest of the things that she had to do to get $1, but being a single mother, she was going to do whatever it took for her and her baby to survive, and that's just what it was. But she would never, you know, partake in those things now. In the last 4 years, 5 years almost, she's grown so much. So the lawyer tells her, like, of course I'm going to represent you. You have to pay me though, right? And so the lawyer's like, and I've seen this happen in movies. It's so nice to know that it happens in real life too. But the lawyer's like, do you have $1? And Rucker's like, yeah, I have $1. What do you need $1 for? And he's like, pay me that $1 and I'll represent you. And she did. And he went on to represent her for the next 4 years. He sat down with her, went over the discovery, showed her how they had, you know, her ID at the pharmacy, the footage of her walking into the pharmacy, the statement from the best friend. Like, there was a lot of evidence against Rucker, right? So he tells her, like, we're gonna figure this out. He calls her, he's like, hey, you got court in the morning, I'm gonna get you out of it, don't worry about it. Boom, gets her out of it. He's like, don't come to court. Next court date comes. He's like, I don't know if I can get you out of it. If I can, I'll call you. If not, show up. She shows up. As she's sitting, waiting to go into court, the lawyer's secretary calls her and she's like, yo, he got you out. Leave the courthouse right now. The lawyer asks Rucker, what is the outcome you want out of this? Like, what do you want? And Rucker's like, I want to be vindicated. I don't want to serve no jail time, and I definitely don't want any felonies on my record, right? So the lawyer's like, okay, bet. Like, I'll go ahead and present that to the prosecutor and see what we can work out. Through all of this, Rucker is always asking the lawyer, what about Dusty? When is Dusty going to get charged? When is Dusty going to be a part of this court case? And she never comes up. Ultimately, this case ends up getting dragged out for like 3 years. She doesn't even hear from the lawyer for like 2 years. After the beginning where she was calling him over and over and over again, almost every single day, trying to get an update, and the lawyer told her, hey, if I hear anything, I'll let you know. If you don't hear anything from me, there's nothing new. She backed off and just went on living her life for 2.5 years with this looming over her head. Over that time was that Dusty had created so much distance between them. On one of her birthdays, Dusty ends up calling Rucker and being like, hey, I got this list of things that you need to be working on. Like, you're a bad person because of this, that. Basically told her everything that she didn't like about her, right? And Rucker's like, hold on, we've been friends for 10 years. Not even just friends, best friends for the past 10 years plus. And you're telling me that you have this running list of everything that you don't like about me, just handy, ready to go. And the best friend's like whole, you know, reasoning for telling her all of this was, you're going into new year, and I just think these are things that you need to be working on. Saying all of this because I'm trying to help you. Rucker didn't really care though. When Dusty first told her, go on the run until I get your bond money together, Rucker had already decided, you're no longer my friend. Like, you have nothing good, you know, in store for me. I need to back off. So Rucker mentioned that, you know, her grandmother told her back in like 2012, like, this girl is not your friend. Keep an eye on her, you know? And sure enough, 8 years later, Rucker found this to be very true. So she's talking to her grandma about everything that's going on. And her grandma told her, like, if your lawyer is anything like mine, he will make sure to drag this case out as long as he can and get it to the point that they either give you a slap on the wrist or they just drop all the charges, right? So, you know, the silence doesn't bother Rucker at this point. She's like, okay, he's just dragging this whole thing out, right? So fast forward, it's December 2024 now, and Rucker's out. I think she said she was working out. She runs into her lawyer and she's like, hey, you're the person I've been meaning to talk to. Like, what's going on? Any new updates? And the lawyer's like, hey, call my office in the morning. So she's like, all right, bet, cool. So she calls the office in the morning. He's like with clients. Calls the next day, he's in court. Calls the next day, still with clients. Like, she keeps calling. She's like, I need this update. The lawyer finally calls Rucker back and he's like, hey, the prosecutor's not willing to drop the charges. So we're either gonna have to go to trial or you're gonna have to accept a plea deal. And so she's like, okay, what's the plea deal? The charge that was carrying 5 years federal time and was a felony, they dropped and made a misdemeanor. So she's like, okay, cool. So I'm not going to have, a felony on my record. That's amazing. What they ended up charging her with is attempt to steal controlled substances. At this point, Rucker had to make a decision. She's like, that is what I tried to do. I did attempt to steal some controlled substances. So I'll accept that plea. That's cool with me. And you're not giving me a felony? Sounds perfect. Let's take the plea deal. She calls her lawyer, tells him just that. The lawyer goes through all the procedures, making sure she understands, like no one's promising her anything, no one's coercing her into taking this deal. She told him, I'm taking this on my own volition. Nobody's coercing me into taking this deal. So then she has her court date. So January 19th of this year, Rucker went to court with her mother for support, and she stood before the judge after hearing a few other cases, and she went to see if the judge would accept the plea deal. Now, she was prepared by the lawyer, and he told her, like, the prosecutor's job is to go up there and rip you to shreds, to prove that you don't have good character and all of that. So when the prosecutor went up there and was dragging Rucker, talking about her conviction from 2019 and all of that, she was fine. Then Rucker's lawyer goes up there and says, hey, I can speak to her character. I've known her since she was a kid. She was actually one of my former students. She basically edified her and spoke very kindly about her character, right? Rucker stood up, pled guilty to the misdemeanor. Rucker's lawyer also stressed that all this happened back in 2020. Rucker has not gotten in any trouble with law enforcement since then. The judge was really impressed. He accepted the plea deal, said that it was time served, that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., those 12 hours that she sat in jail was time served, and he told her that she was free to go. Rucker moved on. She's pretty sure that the doctor that Dusty used to work for still doesn't know what actually happened, doesn't know that Dusty stole all those prescription pads, that she was doing this before the incident, well after the incident, all of that, right? It got to the point that Dusty actually had to leave that doctor's office and start going and working for another doctor's office, right? But at the end of the day, Rucker's like, good riddance. I'm good. I'm safe. I get to be here for my babies. I'm not going to be, shipped off to prison. Everything worked out in the end. And she learned so much. Now, as far as like revenge on the best friend, she had about 5 years to think about it. She thought about sending people. She thought about beating her up herself. She thought about a bunch of stuff. But in the end, she just thought, this girl will have her own karma. And that's none of Rucker's business. I think it's an unfortunate thing, but like she said, there was lessons that she needed to learn. There were standards that she needed to raise, and there was boundaries that she needed to, assert. I'm glad that this chapter is over. Ultimately, Dusty wasn't charged with anything, and, she moved on with her life as well. You guys tagged me in this a bunch. I wanted to make sure I got it out to you guys. I appreciate you guys as always. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
What do y'all think about this video? You know what to do. Comment below. This is Life with Sean Renee, and I'm out. Bye.